So for the first time in quite a while, we're not going to talk about Donald Trump. I'm just going to have a quick check. How long is it? Because he's been on everything, hasn't he? When was the last time I did a stream that had nothing to do with MAGA? It was a long time ago. Oh wait, hang on. Middle of February. So we're talking about energy today. There was an article yesterday, completely took me by surprise. Wasn't really expecting it. That the UK government is in talks with EDF, the state-owned energy company of France. And remember, just to take you back, there's some very relevant questions at the beginning of the chat, by the way. I will get to those in one moment. But after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, of course, obviously, oil and gas supplies disrupted for Europe. And although Boris Johnson kept saying he was Prime Minister at the time, you may remember like 3 Prime Ministers ago, and he kept saying, oh, but we've got very little reliance. We don't really get Russian gas and oil. And it's like, yeah, that doesn't matter because we get it. All the gas and oil we get, it doesn't matter where it's excavated. We're buying it on the international market. So the cost still went up for us, right? And of course, the media didn't bother to explain this. So nonetheless, our energy bills massively increase. So when Nigel Farage is talking about, oh, net zero is costing us a fortune, it's like, no, fossil fuels are what's costing us a fortune. And those lies of Farage should not work because people literally saw that in the UK, our electricity prices, domestic electricity prices, doubled, literally doubled, not close to doubled, actually doubled. And business prices went up even more. So lots of restaurants, things like that went out of business. And in France, they didn't. They went up. They went a few percent. Why? Because France basically owns its own energy. And in fact, and this surprised me, I have to say, because my view of Macron, I know he's described as a centrist. He seems to swing slightly right to me. But in that period afterwards, France, who sort of owned most of EDF, they took it all. They just took it all, didn't they? Well, they didn't take it all. They bought it all out. But so EDF, as I understand it now, is completely owned by the French state. But EDF in Britain is a privatised company, or it's a private company. It's not privatised, of course, because it belongs to the French state. So when we're paying energy prices, when we're buying electricity off EDF, it doesn't matter whether you are an EDF customer or not. So I will actually just go back to one question. Someone asked towards the beginning about the national grid. Jack, they're saying, does the UK have a single electrical grid? Yes, we do. For example, does renewable energy generated in Scotland usable by people in London? Yeah, it's all on the same grid, all of it, which is why, and this caught people by surprise after the cost of energy massively increased. And I saw on social media, people were saying, hang on a minute, my energy supplier says they generate all of their electricity from renewable sources. And indeed, some of them do. Because remember, there are different... It's really weird to talk about energy companies in the UK because it's a really weird system. An energy company can produce electricity and be a broker. So when you are a customer of an energy company, you're not a customer of someone who produces electricity. You may or may not be, but you're not. That's not what you're paying for. You are a customer of a broker because everyone gets the same electricity. Every single source of power, whether it's the solar panel on your roof, because remember, if you've got a solar panel on your roof and it's generating more electricity than at that moment you are using, you effectively sell it back to the national grid. Not for a very good price, I don't think, but you do. So everything that's hooked up to the national grid, nuclear power stations, gas-fired power stations, solar, wind, whatever, it's all feeding into the same thing and we just draw on it. Which is why we keep saying that the cost of electricity is pegged to the price of producing it via the most expensive form, which is fossil fuels, gas. And that is because, yeah, it all comes from the same place. And of course, if we can get rid of our reliance on gas, we've already got rid of our reliance on coal, which is another expensive form. If we can get rid of our reliance on gas, we can then we can actually have cheaper bills because it costs so much less to get your electricity from renewable sources. Like the price of producing electricity from like gas is it's between, I think, about 4 and 8 pence. Whereas for solar and wind, it's between like 3 and 6 pence or something like that. So I think for solar, it might be between 4 and 6 pence. And then for wind, it's between 3 and 6 pence. So it's cheap. Solar and wind are just cheaper. And percentage-wise, significantly cheaper. But there we go. Ivan there saying, I'm all for nuclear nationalisation. Water too. Water in time, I think. I think water in time. Anyway, let's go through a few questions. Because I want to actually talk about a couple of things related to this news. Obviously, EDF don't have to sell it to us. We're not talking about like forcing them or anything. We're just negotiating. Obviously, we can't afford to like throw a lot out. But remember that GB Energy has been set up. There was, I mean, I've said this before. When GB News was, it's GB News, behave yourself. No, we don't want those nationalised. Although I would rather Lisa Nandy was in charge of it than Nigel Farage. Paul Marshall is the fellow I'm thinking of, actually. He's the one who owns it, isn't he? But the GB Energy is what I meant. Sorry if I say GB News. That's just I've got them on the brain. GB Energy was set up, and we were thinking, so what exactly is it going to be? It's going to drive. We knew it was going to drive renewable energy expansion in the country, and people going, but is it actually going to be a nationalised energy company, or is it just going to funnel money to private investment effectively? But no, it was revealed last year that it will own its own. It will also act as an investment fund, but it will also own its own energy production as well. So it will actually invest in things that it will own. And this sounds like a big one, because if we, because solar and wind, with huge potential in the UK for it. I know there's a lot of people go, oh, it's not very sunny. It actually is plenty sunny in this country. It's not that bad. But it's very windy. It's incredibly windy. And, so you've got lots and lots of scope for solar and wind in general. There's also some locations that are suitable for hydroelectric. Hydroelectric is a very cost-effective way. If you can, but you can't just build that anywhere you like here. Wind and solar, there's plenty of places to build that. Hydroelectric, a bit limited. But people will still say, oh, but we need the reliable source. We need the reliable source. Well, solar and wind are now actually way more reliable. People are trying to think about the early days of solar and wind when it was much less efficient. It's way more efficient. It's getting a lot more efficient. So even though solar and wind are now already significantly cheaper than coal or gas, they're actually set to get even cheaper because, they're producing more and more efficient turbines and solar panels. So, but people will still say we need these sources of energy that wind, rain or shine will work. So I'm not a fan of nuclear, I have to say. Nuclear fission, if we could crack nuclear fusion, brilliant, but I'm not a fan of nuclear fission. However, if it will calm people down, I'm okay with continuing nuclear fission for a bit, right? Certainly better than gas. At least it doesn't. The pollution it produces, we can contain. It's not cheap and it's for a very long time, but we can contain it. But there we go. One angry pagan there saying have geothermal to tap into in the southwest. Again, very much based on geography with geothermal. Yes, geothermal. I'm not actually sure about the costing. I used to know about the costings of it when I used to teach it, but that's a long time ago now and it'll be different now anyway. But yeah, geothermal where you can. But again, like geothermal, hydroelectric, even tidal, even though we're an island, these are not going to be big parts of the solution. You can, in some places, put some just, to contribute. But solar and wind are the ones in the future we're going to get most of our energy from. Anyway, let me just quickly check up here, just because I think there were a couple of other questions. John, they're saying, what's the best argument to make for renewable energy when it comes to skeptics, lower bills or national security? Maybe the latter. I actually think, no, I think the bills. There's too many times in my life where I've seen people persuaded by a policy, purely on the basis it'll make the cost of living a little bit cheaper. And when we have a cost, and we've had it, there's been a lot of people in this country who've had a cost of living crisis for a very long time. Remember, Brexit was ultimately a vote. I mean, you can go right back. You can go back to 2010. Why did Labour lose that election? There's lots of things you can argue about, the quality of the campaign, stuff like that. But ultimately, people thought that Labour had let them down on the economy. Why do people care about the economy? Because the pound in their pocket. Brexit, why did people vote for Brexit? Because they were told it would reduce the cost of living for them in many cases. Some people had different reasons, but a lot of people, it was because they were told that things would go down. The cost of energy would go down. The cost of clothes would go down. The cost of food would go down. Things like that. And, you know, it's the same thing here. You know, with America, with Trump, again, why did they vote for this person who committed every sin imaginable? And the ones he hadn't committed, he's boasted about he could commit and nothing would happen, like shooting people on, what was it, Main Street or whatever, I don't know. Because he said he was going to make the price of eggs go down, the price of gas go down. So, no, I think bills are the motivator. I do. I think if Labour can if they want to push a policy, explain to people the best way to sell any policy to the public is show them how it will make things cheaper, which is why I wish when people are engaging with the public on Brexit issues, you know, there's lots of things to talk about. I would like to push the idea that things could actually be cheaper. If we can trade cost-free, hassle-free, we can make foods cheaper. We can even make electricity cheaper. So the question earlier on about the national grid. So we have a national grid here. We all draw everything that every form of electricity that's produced in this country feeds into that national grid, and we just draw from it. And but we're also linked up to other grids, right? So we are also linked up to the European grid, and we have had to draw on it in the last few years since we've left, and it cost us a fortune. So when was it? It might have been 2022 or early 2023. I think over the winter of 22-23, I think we did have to draw on the European grid quite a bit, and it cost us a lot of money because we were no longer in the EU single energy market. That would have saved us a fortune, but there it is. Ivan, they're saying Green Party members and activists in my area still saying the sizable nuclear power station, massive mistake, energy policy all over the place. There are some inconsistencies and baffling things about green energy policy, I will say. What I would say, though, is I understand it. I don't like nuclear fission either, and I don't think we need it. We can get the electricity we need from wind and solar. However, I also appreciate that a lot of the public may not understand that because they think about it. It's considered an unreliable source because it's not always sunny and it's not always windy. And it's like, that's true. Like for solar, it is true. It's not, and people will say things like, "Oh, but when it's dark, that's when we need the most electricity." It's like, yeah, but we have battery storage for that, and it is much more efficient these days, and it still works out better than gas. But for wind, I mean, obviously day or night doesn't matter there, but also for wind, it might not be that windy in one part of the country, but it will be in another. So we can get everything we need from wind and solar, but I do get that people don't, and you know, in politics, really, you have to bring the public along with you because these are things that you can't. If it was something you could just forge ahead with and do it 6 months later, you can show the results. Sure, but that's not the case. We're talking about a long-term project here, so I accept the need for nuclear politically, just politically. So I'm absolutely fine with this. Aubrey, they're saying there are arguments for reduced costs and national energy security for renewable energy, even though the initial investment were relatively high. I mean, the investment's been promised anyway, so we've already got that budgeted for. I don't know how much we'd have to pay EDF for these nuclear plants. And again, the issue with buying something that already exists, it's much better to fund it as a startup effectively. Buying something that already exists means you don't make any money. So if GB Energy buy these nuclear power stations from EDF, they're effectively going to have to pay off the cost of doing that. It's like if you pay to nationalise something, which is why we can't just nationalise everything overnight, because if you pay to nationalise it, how do you prove to the public it was a good idea to do it? Because they will want the lower bills. You can't say to them, well, hang on a minute, we've got to keep the bills where they are because we need to pay off the investment. But in about 20 years' time, then you should see lower bills. It's like, and you won't anyway, will you? Because in 20 years' time, the Tories will be back in and they'll have sold it all off again. So it'll never happen. So you have to do it on the cheap. But I have to say, you know, one of my bugbears is too many people. I mean, at the moment, if you ask people what Labour are doing, all they can think of is the unpopular stuff, right? Partly down to their own comms disasters and because the media are interested in giving them a fair shout. And they have done some very unpopular things. But you keep getting people go, hey, they're neoliberal. And it's like, was it The Princess Bride or something with that phrase where it's like, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Because like even the last Labour government was not neoliberal because they didn't shrink the state. They didn't nationalise things, but they did regulate, which is not what neoliberals deregulate. Now, we have got some deregulation going on at the moment, haven't we? I've noticed with banking as well. So on the deregulation side, you can certainly raise eyebrows at Labour. But in terms of actual nationalisation, bringing public services under government control, which is what nationalisation is. Nationalisation isn't about ownership, because remember, in a pure socialist state, you're a communist state, and therefore there is no ownership. So it's not about ownership, it's about control. And if you look at the nationalisation we've already had, you know, we've got, so train companies, not the rail track itself at the moment, but rail companies are being nationalised. Accommodation for service personnel, we did actually pay for that. That is something that's, and that's the problem with it. Like, so we've bought out the private contracts for accommodation for service personnel in this country because the quality of the accommodation was shocking, absolutely shocking. And that actually cost us a lot. It cost us quite a few billion. And we're not going to make that back for 25 years. And that's the problem with paying to nationalise. If you don't make your money back for 25 years, you're never going to demonstrate to the public that it was a good idea to do it. But in that particular case, that's not something the public pay for directly, so it's not a big deal. Abolishing NHS England, although that doesn't change costs as such. Well, it does actually, because we were spending a load on duplication. But nonetheless, that was a case of NHS decisions in England not being taken by the government. So bringing that back under government control is nationalisation, even though no ownership has changed. We've also nationalised part of the national grid. The part of the national grid that works on allocation is now under government control. That's been nationalised as well. But there we go. And then we've also got some possibilities. So British Steel may be nationalised. I'm not as bothered about that one, as long as we have steel production. Water companies which go bust. I mean, the obvious thing to do there will be to nationalise. The EDF nuclear power stations is another one. So, you know, we've got quite a lot of nationalisation going on, quite frankly. It's really impressive. It's really not what people expect as well. If you sort of say to someone, actually, Labour are nationalising quite a lot of things, a lot of people don't actually realise. They may know about the train companies, but that's about it. I don't think anyone knows about the other stuff. Aubrey, they're saying, referring to a decentralised energy grid where some percentage of energy is produced by the consumer, whether residential or commercial, with mass energy production as backup. This is what we're going to have. This is what we need. Now, so you're talking about produced by the consumer. So you're talking about solar panels on roofs. I am a big believer that we should have solar panels everywhere the sun shines, quite frankly, on constructs. I don't mean every bit of land, but on every roof that points at the sun. But what we're going to see is, as well as that, because that's coming back, we're going to start to see, because remember, before 2010, there were subsidies in place. There were, you saw people getting solar panels on the roofs because it was made cost effective by the government. I think that's coming back. But also, what we're going to be seeing is a lot more community-based, small-scale production. So it's not in someone's house, but it's like a local village or small town or part of a town or something like that. But local, smaller scale, medium scale, you might say, energy production. And these existed under the Conservatives, but it was very difficult to get planning permission for them. I mean, this is one of the big problems. You had some of these projects, often you would find them getting the go-ahead in Labour areas in the northwest and so on. And then in the southwest of England, they were getting blocked. Same energy system, you know, there's like no good reason for it. So that's what we need. We do need a lot more smaller scale. It's not all about big power stations, because when you have a small number of big power stations, whether it be whatever it is, wind farm or whatever, when you're transferring energy along the cables on the pylons, you've got energy loss. And so the longer the longer it's traveling, the more energy loss you have. So if you can produce energy in roughly the same density as if your energy production is in roughly the same density as energy consumption, that's the most efficient way to do it. Now, as I discussed in my second video today, that's not, it will still be a little bit lopsided towards Scotland, because Scotland already produce a lot of energy for their needs, but at the same time they don't want to lose the investment either, because it's jobs. So it will always still be lopsided towards Scotland. You've got most of Scotland's empty, absolutely huge areas of land to put onshore wind farms, which we want more of, as well as solar, and you've got more hydroelectric potential there as well. But you basically need to put it everywhere you can. You know, I mean, you've got, in some countries you have like covered cycle lanes, and you've got solar panels on those. So you shade the cyclists, and not throw shade at the cyclists, you shade the cyclists from the sun, and you're collecting the energy. You can have, and you do have in this country, you'll have like small solar panels on motorway that can power the lights. You can have solar panels, you know, in the supermarket. You could cover the car parks, not completely, but you can have covers around the car parks collecting energy to power the tills in the supermarket. There are so many cases of producing energy, like just putting solar panels in particular, because wind turbines you can't stick like in the middle of towns or cities, but you can put solar panels there. And it all adds up to quite a lot of energy being produced. Chris, they're saying, back in the 2000s, Stoke City Council worked in partnership with solar firm to fit solar panels. All their housing stock catches the residents would build for any solar power they consumed. Well, that's presumably not at a higher rate than they were drawing on the national grid. That would be fine, wouldn't it? Aubrey, they're saying, not just solar, there's a research suggesting hydrogen fuel cells more competitive, including deriving H2 from fossil fuels. Now, I'm not sure about that one. It's more expensive. That's quite a bit more expensive, setting them up. Hang on a minute. Let me see if I can quickly find, there was a report on it, but I may not be able to find it quickly. I'm not going to like say no to any particular form of energy generation, but solar and wind are the ones that are proven. They're getting more efficient. They're cheap to set up compared with what you'll get out of them. Hang on a minute. Let's see if I can find it here. Bum, bum, bum. I think this is it. Yeah, hold on. Let me just... I'm looking at something, I'm not showing it to you. So this was from a report a couple of years ago from the government, UK government. This is hydrogen cost. This is cost up here, cost per megawatt hour. Hydrogen up there, offshore wind, onshore wind, large scale solar. And there's here again, cost per megawatt hour. These are for setting up. These are for projects, right? Not the cost of production, because the cost of production of solar is nothing. But it's the cost of the setup of the projects. And again, hydrogen, offshore wind, onshore wind, large scale solar. So hydrogen is, who's popping there saying hydrogen is not happening until its cost to manufacture decreased by 90% current cost. It is very expensive set up. So I don't think hydrogen at the moment is a big one to expand into. Maybe for the future, who knows? I'm not sure about that. Jack, they're saying California's the only state in the US that sells hydrogen for cars. They're not cost competitive, but you can look into it yourself. Yeah. Well, I mean, all I know is just for this, it's not. I mean, we've had multiple reports on it. It's not cheap. It's not cheap. If you can sell it to someone, I mean, it's saying that hydrogen is better for shipping, sure. If you can find someone to sell it to, absolutely. This is why, I mean, this is quite similar to fracking, shale gas. And Conservatives in Reform UK terribly keen on fracking in this country. It's like, there's no point. Oh, we get fuel from it. No, it's not. It's rubbish for fuel. It's absolutely rubbish. The benefit of fracking, if you do it at all, like America gets some benefit from it. Shouldn't do it still, but it does. Is because you can then sell it to others. But for your own, fracking for your own domestic fuel needs is a really bad idea. The only benefit of it is commercial, selling it overseas, because you can then sell it overseas. Is hydrogen expensive because it's not been invested enough? I really couldn't tell you. I'm not expert enough to answer that. But it's nonetheless, the point is, if you are Ed Miliband right now and you've got a certain pot of money, and it's not as big a pot of money as he was going to get, remember, because the Tories moaned, and probably wouldn't have been able to afford it anyway. But he's got a pot of money and he needs to use it. He wants to get us to the point where only 5% of our energy needs are coming from fossil fuels, basically. And in order to do that, I wish they would lump biofuels in with that as well, because there's lots of reasons not to want to use biofuels. But anyway, never mind, fossil fuels. You've got to do it in the most cost-effective way, particularly if you want to own some of these means of energy production. Like, what are you to do? If you're the government, you've got some money to spend on projects. Would you rather have a situation where you buy effectively and own a wind farm or a solar farm or hydroelectric plant, whatever it happens to be? Or in order to get more, do you say, well, I'll tell you what, in order to attract private investment in, we will put some public money into it so that you can more easily and more quickly make a profit. And we will put the public money in, but not own anything. So, so if you want to get the best bang for your buck, you need to do the cheapest stuff. The standing charge is pure evil. The standing charge should not exist. At the very least, I would like to see the government have a social tariff that basically says for households below a certain level of income, there is no standing charge. At the very least, phase it out. If you don't want to go the whole hog, because that might put up the cost of electricity, so then just sort of say something like, because apart from anything else, you're punishing people for like being energy efficient, and it mostly punishes people on lower incomes. So I would at the very least say, for households below a certain level of income, there should not be a standing charge. Like introduce effectively a social tariff. Going to go out on a limb and say once solid state batteries become available as promised, every house can use one to store vast amounts of energy that won't degrade like normal wet battery oil. Yes. I mean, if you think about the next 10 or 20 years, certainly, assuming the global economy survives, then we should indeed. I mean, if we've got a situation, China has been already running away with the race to develop low carbon technology. America was doing that. I don't know how much damage Trump will do to it. He obviously sets himself as the enemy of low carbon technology. However, it's very lucrative. So he's unlikely to he's obviously not going to support it, but I would argue he's probably unlikely to actually try to destroy the industry because it will generate a lot of profits and provide a lot of jobs. I don't know why he doesn't just take credit for it. He's a simpleton, really is, isn't he? But also in Europe and the UK, we're going to be trying to develop our own low carbon technology. The UK talks big, like Labour talk big on it all the time, probably bigger than they'll deliver, but it's the only thing they actually hype, I don't know why Labour don't actually hype lots of things, because they hype the hell out of the fact that we're going to be a low carbon leader. I don't think we are, but it's nice if we're going to at least join the race. And in the next 10 or 20 years, yes, we should have much more efficient systems. Do you know what? In 20 years' time, we should be looking back at the very idea that we will be getting our energy from renewable sources, won't we? In 10 to 20 years' time, our energy will effectively be renewable sources. And, every time there's some part of the world that has a wobbly on fossil fuels, it'll be like, we're glad we're out of that one. When I'm pegging there to talk about carbon capture. So a carbon capture project on the south coast towards Southampton. It's working on removing CO2 from the sea. Oh, yeah, I saw that. Better than the other ideas I've seen. We already know how to store CO2. The carbon capture stuff. So Labour were announcing another one, weren't they, this week? The carbon capture thing, there's two sides to it. Some people go, it's not proven and it's not efficient, stuff like that. And it's like, well, that may be true. But first of all, there are some industries for which it is effective, like concrete, for example, producing concrete. But the other thing is, it's a relatively low cost of generating jobs. Remember the thing I always say that was the worst thing Margaret Thatcher did was, so I grew up in a mining village, and I always say that my problem with Thatcher is not that they effectively ran down the coal mining industry. It was knackered anyway at that point. There were miners in my village, and they would say, oh, but there's still coal down there. It says, yeah, but it's getting really expensive to dig it out. It was not commercial. So the coal industry was sort of going anyway. You weren't going to keep it alive. It was just where she failed the country was in just allowing industries to run down where entire towns and cities depended on these industries. Because it wasn't just coal. She ran down other things. Like she ran down the steel industry. We actually bloody well needed that. And there was never any thought about replacing those jobs. That was the problem. There was no plan. There was no thought about what jobs these people will have. And if you let these people just become unemployed, not only are you going to have to pay out more in social security, but they're not going to be able to spend as much in the local economies. Loads of other people lose their jobs and the whole economy goes to hell. So what Labour are doing, they're not making the same mistake. They are trying to run down the fossil fuel industry. So from that point of view, it's a bit of Thatcherism. They're running down an industry, right? But they need to create the new jobs. They can't just run it down and say, oh, but the other stuff will filter in. They have to create those jobs. And the carbon capture schemes are really, they're not a bad way of just creating jobs in the sector. Because here's the thing. Imagine this from like a strategic point of view. I mean, climate emergency is the main reason why we need to do this. But it is also of economic benefit. But also, think about it from a political strategy point of view. The Conservatives, why are they so pro-fossil fuel? It's not because they don't understand the things that Labour MPs understand or Green MPs. They all understand. Green MPs, Labour MPs, Tory MPs, they're all as thick and ignorant as each other, right? They know as much or as little as each other. There's no party that breeds particularly thick MPs. I know Reform UK have 25% of their MPs are as thick as mints, but that is because they've only got 4 MPs. The reason is because they get a lot of money from the fossil fuel industry to the Conservative Party basically exists as a lobby group. They're not a political party. They're a lobby group. They exist to for the mercantile. They should be called the mercantile party. They exist to further the commercial interests of whoever will pay them. So imagine in 10 or 20 years' time, we're getting all our energy from renewable sources. It's working great. We're not paying as much. We'll, instead of having to compare ourselves to France and go, why are we paying so much more than France? We'll be able to compare ourselves to other countries and say, look, we're paying much less than, you know, some other country potentially. I suspect not France because they're doing the same thing. But there may be some other countries where we can compare more favourably because we're once again leading on renewable energy as we used to. And there'll be no point in the Tories taking money off the oil industry because there'll be nothing they'll be able to do. The Tories are not going to win an election on a platform of, yeah, we're going to get rid of all this renewable. Because once it's in and people actually see that it's working well, a lot of the arguments disappear. John, they're saying, my grandfather retired as a colliery overman. He stated, no one will miss working 2,000 feet underground, but they will miss the income. Well, this was it. It was a crap job. It was an horrible job. I mean, some of my mates, their dads were miners. I say I lived in a mining village. You knew miners. But people need an income. They need a job. And it's not just like Keir Starmer talks about the need for jobs for dignity. It's not just dignity. You need bloody money. You need to eat. And it's crap being on unemployment. And, you know, so that's what this is. That's what we're doing. We're making sure that the jobs, you're not winding something down and then worrying about where to get the job. The jobs effectively have to be there before something closes down. You know, so if parts of the fossil fuel industry are going to start closing down, which is what we want, the people who work there, it's like, well, here's a job to move into that pays just as well or more. So that's what we need to do. In fact, what we need to do really is, you know, create a scenario where those jobs are there and we need people to fill them. Then that way the unions will have nothing to complain about as well. It's like, well, we've got all these jobs. Those workers are perfectly suitable for them. Why don't we persuade them to go and move over there? Because unions aren't very happy with fossil fuel companies in general. What could be done to reduce the power of the fossil fuel lobby? Stop not needing them. Because at the end of the day, they've got a lot of money. They will pay politicians. They will pay politicians. And no realistic tightening of how donations can work will stop that. The best way will be to stop all donations and just have political parties funded from the public purse. But I don't think that's going to happen. And in the absence of that, like, there are moves to restrict foreign donations, but that will never apply to a big oil company because they actually have operations in Britain, and they'll post profits. So, yeah. The only thing we can do to reduce the power of the fossil fuel lobby, first of all, counter it with... So what happens is, and I might have some news on this summer, I'm hoping anyway. What happens is, obviously, every now and then you'll see some story, some misinformation on social media and other parts of the media about fossil fuels or energy, renewable energy, whatever it is. And it's all driven, it's coordinated. It's all coordinated. It's no surprise that on the same day you'll see the Telegraph printing something, you'll see the Times echoing it, the Daily Mail, you'll see Reform UK MPs, you'll see Tory MPs, all on the same day, all pushing the same message. Why? Because they're all in cahoots ultimately. And what we need is a similar thing for the renewable energy lobby effectively need to do the same thing. They need to get lots of people, could be content creators like me, so that on a particular day when either they want to publicize something or counter something, they just go have a network of people where they say, right, this is a message we need to counter, go. And like 1,000 progressive content creators all put stuff out on the same day to get that message out there. And I am hoping something like that will occur. But the other thing is just to not, if in 20 years time, we're basically using electric cars, we're getting all our energy from renewable sources, apart from maybe 1 or 2%, or preferably, but if we can get rid of, if we don't need fossil fuels for energy, and we don't need fossil fuels for vehicles, what do you then need it for? You might have backup diesel generators. They may still need those for like hospitals and so on. So you may have some diesel generators. You may have, may not, but you may. We're always going to need oil, I suppose, for like pharmaceuticals and paints and plastics. I say always, that's not the case. There are ways of producing plastics and oils from living organisms. So maybe more research into that. But, but if we can stop burning it, put it that way, if we can stop burning it, then you massively reduce the power of the fossil fuel industry. Because like I said, once we've established renewable energy, firmly established, once you can show that we can get all of our energy from renewable sources because we'll actively be doing it, at that point, people are not going to go back. Because look at the arguments. The arguments are, you can't actually generate all your energy from renewable. Well, once we're doing it, we bloody well can. The arguments are it's too expensive. Well, once the bills aren't going up when Russia has a drop or something, or Saudi Arabia, then again we'll kill that off as well. Once we get this done, no one's going to go backwards on it. Once we get it done, no one's going to go backwards. Once we've got everything in place for people to have electric cars and the charging's not a problem, stuff like that, no one's going to want to go back on that. In fact, no one will be making, in 20 years time, I mean, who's really even going to be making combustion engines? So that's what we need to do. We need to just keep forging ahead with this, pushing ahead with this, and make the momentum unstoppable. And that you just won't be able to go back. You won't be able to backslide on it. It's a bit like the Conservatives and the NHS. The Conservatives opposed the NHS right from the very start. And yet here we are, like 70 years later. Not quite 70 years later. It took a few years. But, coming on to 70 years later. And, 80 years later is what I meant to say. But it is over 70 years. And they still haven't got rid of it. They were working very hard to get rid of it. But it's one of those things. Once you've introduced something and the public see the benefit, it's very difficult to backslide. And the thing is as well, unlike the NHS, this is something that you'll have across the whole world. It's not just Britain that will be doing this in isolation. We'll be doing it with everyone else as well. So I think the fossil fuel industry, they would have been better off. I know they try and pretend they're investing in renewable energy, but they'd have been better off actually doing that properly. And that's probably where they'll end up. These oil companies will probably end up, if they don't actually will just want to become irrelevant, they will end up having to be in the renewable energy business themselves, won't they? Like properly. But anyway. To reduce the influence of any lobby that is counter to the public interest is to make outcast any politician taking the particular lobby's money. Well, I mean, this is why a lot of people, myself included, would prefer it if you removed big donations from politics. Now, you can't remove donations altogether because you'd say, well, you just pay from the public purse according to how well you did in elections. Like you can have for local elections, you can have so much money according to how well you did the last time and so on from the public purse. And that's all fine. the problem is then, how do you allow a new party to start up? So what I would say is that only individuals are allowed to donate. No organisations are allowed to donate. And even an individual is only allowed to donate, let's say, £1,000 a year. Because there's not enough individual donors for the Conservative Party will give them much for that. So something like that you could do. But it won't happen. It won't happen, I have to say. And the reason it won't happen is because the Conservatives won't do it for obvious reasons, because they depend on high value donors. And Labour won't do it because it would create a massive schism with the unions. Because if you're going to do it properly, the unions can't donate either. So it will never happen. So there's no point in chasing what you might call an ideal situation that's just impossible, practically impossible. So what we have to do is counter misinformation. Ideally we need a network of progressive people who have an audience and who agree. The problem is, whenever you get these networks appearing, people have their own little things, and they find it's much easier to find a reason to disagree with someone than to agree. Do you know what I mean? Very few people are like Joe Cox. So what you need is a very disciplined network, I think, where no one's allowed to talk to each other. Shut up about your hobbies, your hobby horses, and like just list the things. These are the things we all agree on, right? So whenever there's a need to discuss one of these things, we'll put the word out in 3 days' time, prepare some content. In 3 days' time, we're going to go with this all at the same time. And then if you had like 1,000 content creators all on the same day pushing out some content on a particular theme, that would be very powerful, because the way it works, like on YouTube, and it'll work this way on other social media as well, but the way it works, for example, on YouTube, it's quite easy to understand. So you watch a video on something, and if you watched it and YouTube goes, oh, they seem to enjoy this, and then YouTube will notice there's lots of other content on the same thing. So let's say it's on onshore wind farms. So you put some content on onshore wind farms, people watch it, YouTube, oh, you like that. Here's some other stuff on, and it feeds into each other. So there's an element on YouTube that is not at all competitive. It's where different content creators can actually amplify one another by producing things that the algorithm goes, oh, that's quite similar to that. Why don't you watch that as well? And you could actually generate a lot of eyeballs. And again, it's like, I talk a lot about how Labour are just not using social media enough. They don't understand the benefit. But the same applies to other political parties. And do you know what? The same applies to political groups in general. You name a campaign group, very few of them use social media well. If you think of a campaign, not all of them, some of them are actually all right. Most of them are absolutely dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. Like, I'm just going to YouTube, right? Let me show you something, right? No one's going to doubt that this is a big campaign group. Greenpeace UK, right? Huge group. People, everyone knows who they are. Look at this rubbish. They've got fewer than 30,000 subscribers. The last video 2 months ago, just over 5,000 views. And that's like, they've put effort into this. They've got a load of people to do this. It's got enough. It's got over 5,000 views. It's rubbish. So it's not just political parties, just political groups in general. They're crap. They haven't got a clue. None of them have got a clue. So what they should do, if they really can't be asked to even try and get a message out to people via social media, if they cannot, I'm going to show you something else actually. Hold on, let me show you something else. On my channel, right? And it says this is for the last 28 days, but that grey bar here indicate it's always a day in arrears, so it's actually really 27 days. Look at this. In the last 28 days, really it's 27 days, over 850,000 unique viewers. That's how many people watch some of my content in the last few weeks, 4 weeks. 500,000 returned. 500,000. That's me talking in a shed on my own. I don't network with people really. I'm a hermit. Don't really engage with people. Some people are really gregarious and they form large network groups and, you know, get promoted by each other and stuff like that. I'm rubbish at that. And that's just me on my own in a shed, right? And so if these groups, whether it be a political party or a progressive campaign group, if they cannot be asked to harness this themselves, what they should at least do is get a network of willing content creators together and just say, look, every now and then we will give you some information. We'll give you the expert views. And some of this may be coming, by the way. Get these expert views. And, you know, it's like in 3 days time, here's the stuff. In 3 days, can you produce some content, please? And it could, you know, it could be a short video. It could be a long video. It could be a meme. Just whatever their skill is, whatever that content creator's skill is, can you produce something? And if you've got like 1,000 people who are willing to do that for you, and you do it once a month or once every 2 months, whatever it is, but whenever it happens, if everyone did it at once, that would generate a lot of eyeballs. Anyway, where was I? Hold on. I've finished my little rant now. I'm back to normal. Phil can fund Green Energy Nationwide his cut of YouTube. I wish. Don't get me wrong. I do not complain. I get a lot more than when I was a teacher. In fact, it's quite funny. My eldest stepdaughter, who would you believe is training to be a vet, nearly killed our dogs today. She didn't actually, but I had a bit of a panic. So she and her mum, my wife, she got Oedipus thing going on there. They went out shopping today. So I went down mid-afternoon and went to feed the dogs. So I got the food, chucked them outside, looked in the room, and there was a torn open Easter egg box. I thought, oh no. So I rang them and said, look, how much chocolate was in that pissing Easter egg? How much was left? They said, quite a lot. I thought, bloody hell. Shit, I forgot where I was going with it. Yes, sorry. So anyway, they worked out it's probably fine. They've not been sick or shitting themselves or anything like that. But in trying to work out how much actual chocolate was in it, because it's milk chocolate, my wife looked it up. And then because my wife doesn't like spending a lot of money, it was quite an expensive Easter egg. It was quite a posh one. And she went, how much have you spent on that? And she was giving me the old, what made you think that it's a good idea to spend that much on an Easter egg? And I basically just had to say, because some people thought it was a good idea to give me a shitload of money for talking to a camera. I mean, there's been times in my past when I haven't been able to afford things. Like I couldn't even afford heating at one point in my life. And now I can. But yeah, so I'm not complaining, but it's not quite enough. I'm not Vince Dale. Put it that way. Phil will need more rewilding, reintroduction of species, both flora and fauna, as well as this green energy transition to make proper headway. There's lots of things we should do. But at the moment, energy production, anything that improves everyone's standard of living, and that's going to include in the cities who will not notice a rewilding project, is going to be... Perhaps the people just said there, Phil, it's only got 5,000 views. It's rubbish. Me getting excited, my video gets 1,000 views. Yeah, but you're not. Like everyone knows Greenpeace. It's relative, isn't it? Everyone knows Greenpeace. They should be able to, if they produce a promotional video, they should be able to get more than 5,000 views. And I know they'll say, well, we got 5.2 thousand views. Yeah, that's not enough. That's appalling. Like, if it's appalling for Greenpeace, like, you know, if it's someone, if it's someone with their own little channel, sure, but Greenpeace, albeit the UK arm of it, they're not attempting to engage with the public. I mean, the stunts, yeah, you need the stunts, but why wouldn't you choose to just engage with the public? It's a madness to me that people don't understand the benefits of social media. And as I say, if they can't be asked, because the way you have to build up an audience, you have to do content all the time, or not have to be every day, you know, but regularly, you know, it needs to be several times a month at least. You ideally want one a week if you can, but regular, so that people will keep coming back to it. And if you can't be asked to do that, then use content creators who already have the audience, because if you can get a large group like Greenpeace or Labour or whoever, they probably have supporters that are already established content creators, and a large organisation could probably find 500 or 1,000 who will be willing to be part of a group that every now and then they'll say, we want to go big on this, we want to promote this, or we want to counter this misinformation. Here is your sources, here, all your information sources. These are the extracts from scientific reports, or here is some video that you could use from Professor Cleverclogs of Brains University or whatever. Here is material, here it is, use it, produce content, throw it out all on the same day, please. And I think that would be quite powerful, and they're not doing it. Well, some maybe we'll get a breakthrough, but at the moment, this is not occurring. How they're saying, yeah, I get your point, Phil, just made me chuckle. Everything's relative, but, you know, a large organisation like that should have better reach on social media, and all social media. Because I'll tell you something, we sort of have a rough idea of we have different demographics. It's all right saying, oh, but I did this thing on Twitter, it got 1 million views. So, okay, there's people on Twitter, there's people on Facebook, there's people on TikTok, people on Instagram, and there's people on YouTube. And they're not always the same people. You know, and YouTube's huge, absolutely massive, huge. In America, it's bigger than Netflix. There's more people watch YouTube on, I don't mean YouTube on the television. There are more people in America watch YouTube on the television than watch Netflix. It's massive. But anyway, never mind. Anthony, they're saying, really glad Labour are doing something that's going to be popular and something that puts them in a different place than the opposition next to deal with Europeans, please. Well, that will be announced next month, and I'm hoping, I mean, as I said this morning, we should be going quite quickly on that now, I hope, relatively. I mean, the problem is people are very impatient, and people want it all happening really quickly. And what we have to remember is agreements, international agreements, trade agreements, whatever, traditionally take years. And the problem is that they're too newsworthy now. Brexit has made them newsworthy. And in America, I suppose Trump has made trade negotiations newsworthy in America as well. They didn't used to be. You know, even if you paid close attention to the news and politics as I did all my life, you hardly ever heard anything about a trade deal until it was ready to be announced, because it's boring. It's all in the background. Whereas now, unfortunately, we're having reports on it all the time. And so people are thinking, well, why is it taking so long? It's like it's supposed to take, they usually take about 10 bloody years, or 5 to 10 years. So the fact that we're getting any sort of agreements announced next month, we're hoping, on defence, and then over the next year on trade, is actually really good. And it's only been caused because the EU weren't going to negotiate this quickly. They weren't interested. It's been caused by Trump's madness, really. We need to build more nuclear power plants in the southeast. Tell the NIMBYs to naff off. Well, I don't know that we want. We don't want to go mad on nuclear. just enough to get people satisfied that our energy security is fine. Because all the arguments for fossil fuels are the same arguments that you can use for nuclear. It's like every argument you can come up with to have a coal-fired or a gas-fired power station, it's like everything you can come up with is like, well, why don't we use nuclear then? Oh, yeah, we could use that. Because even if they try and say, oh, but it produces nuclear waste, yeah, which we put under the ground and we can keep there, whereas the waste from your idea gets chucked up into the air and causes flooding as well as other things. Remember reading Noam Chomsky complaining that NAFTA was not being talked about enough in the newspapers when it's coming online. Did he? I wonder why he was bothered. You say, I loathe Trump, but the China tariffs are needed after China's decades-long use of loopholes in trade agreements. So, okay, there are good reasons to attack Chinese trade policy, right? Sure. But the tariffs aren't helping. The tariffs are costing America. They've already cost their farmers, their car industry has already jobs being lost. It's hurting America and it's not hurting China. I mean, it is economically, but they can take the pain. They can take the pain. The government's not going to get booted out of office over this, right? What if Trump wanted to deal with the valid concerns about Chinese trade policies, he would have not made an enemy of the entire world. He would have instead worked on alliances. Like he could have worked with Europe. Supporting Ukraine costs America peanuts compared to, as a proportion of its defense budget, it's not even noticeable. It's not noticeable at all. And then in return for that continued support, he could have said to Europe, the EU specifically, I want you to join me in tackling abuses of trade by China. Now, the EU, although it wouldn't relish like a trade war with China, is a bit hawkish on it because the EU also has issues with Chinese trade policy. So Trump could have formed an alliance and worked to take on the genuine criticisms of Chinese trade policy, but he didn't. And now he's actually, if anything, put China in a much better position in the future. You say, are you sure about that? China's reeling from the tariffs. It absolutely is not. China hasn't backed down on anything. You say people can't afford meat and manufactured products earmarked for export are being returned to the manufacturers. Yes, they'll get them from somewhere else. They have already. They're not going hungry. They can afford the meat. They're getting the meat from Australia now. They're getting the soybeans from Brazil. China had already, because it was preparing for this, over the last 10 years, it has already been diversifying its markets, its export markets. So it used to rely on exports to America for like a big chunk of their exports, like about 20% or something. Now it's about half that. Because they've been working on this for some time. And I'll tell you something, there's not been any backing down from the Chinese government. None at all. There has been backing down from the American government several times a week since this started. And that is because of several reasons. First of all, Trump has not just started a trade war with China, but he's sort of made a trade enemy of lots of, well, literally almost every country in the world. Apart from, ironically, I mean, there's nothing ironic about Russia being missed out, or Belarus, I suppose, but North Korea and Iran. Doesn't Trump pretend he doesn't like Iran? Absolutely hilarious. No tariffs on Iran. 17% tariffs on Israel? Anyway. So they import 15% of beef from the US. Scarcity has pushed up domestic prices. China's not doing as well as what people think. No, it doesn't. China doesn't import 50% of the beef from the US. They import 0% of the beef from the US because they've stopped them all. They've stopped it all. They're now getting it from Australia. And the thing is as well, what privations the Chinese public may have, they will put up with because they are conditioned to. It's not a democracy. You cannot think about the Chinese population like the American population. The American population refused to vote for Harris because they were whining about the price of eggs, which has now gone up even more. They literally voted for a change of government based on the price of eggs. That's not happening in China. But you can wait to see how it if it goes. If you like, you will. I have listened to a lot of trade experts over the past month. I've not heard a single one say that China's struggling. Not a single one. So you're quite welcome to wait. They're not struggling. It's not good for them, but they're not struggling because they've been ready for this. And in the long term, they could actually do quite well out of this. Trump said he didn't tariff Russia because there's hardly any trade with them. How much trade there was with penguins? Exactly. And there is some trade with Russia. It's not that much, granted, but there is some trade. Zero trade with pissing penguins. But anyway, there it is. We'll leave it there. And also the Falkland Islands. The Falkland Islands got hit quite hard. How much trade can they realistically have with them? But there it is anyway. Thanks for coming on, everyone. We'll have to leave it there. Have a great rest of evening. And until next time, I'll see you later.